Did you know that Kunal Shah has another startup, something apart from CRED? It's called Newtap, and it was incorporated by Kunal in 2021. He owns an 80% stake in the company, while CRED, legal name Dreamplug Technologies Private Limited, owns 20% of the company. So the news here is that Kunal wants to raise between $50 and $70 million for Newtap from investors like Sequoia Capital and Singapore sovereign fund GIC at $250 million valuation. So most people have never heard of Newtap. I'm guessing you watching this video right now have never heard of it also, but it's actually a pretty big deal for CRED. It's an NBFC, a non-banking financial company, and Kunal runs the company along with his brother, Rohan Shah Naresh. Now, the way that Newtap was able to become an NBFC is that they acquired Parfait Finance and Investment, which was already an existing registered NBFC, and that's kind of what happens when you acquire an NBFC. You become one thanks to the acquisition, and the goal with this move was to allow CRED to move into the lending space. By raising this between $50 and $70 million, Newtap is going to be able to build trust, both for VCs, because the other VCs will be looking at Sequoia and GIC, which are respected and well-known investors, and also they'll be building trust with customers as well. All right, next up, we've heard about electric scooters catching fire. We've also now heard about battery swapping stations catching fire, but now it looks like drones are catching fire too. This drone in particular actually exploded in Chhattisgarh, and this of course involved the drone's battery pack, which is the thing that actually caused the explosion. The drone was being used for a mapping project, and 4 people in close proximity to the drone were injured by the explosion. 2 were in critical condition, and all 4 were moved to the hospital. So the maker of the drone is a company called IdeaForge, and they're actually the market leader in this space. They have about 50% market share. They're also going public, and they made a statement saying, "We have been in this industry for more than a decade, and it's the first time an incident of this nature has been reported to us and is really unfortunate." Now, the drone in question here was IdeaForge's Q6 model, and it actually recently received certification from the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. Now, like I mentioned, IdeaForge is planning on going public. This is a Mumbai-based company, and they've already received a nod from SEBI for a 300 crore rupee IPO. So I do wonder whether this drone explosion is going to impact the public's perception of the company or not. All right, next up, it looks like Ola Electric is going to have to refund 130 crore rupees to its customers. Why? Well, it's actually because of something that we've already seen in the smartphone space. Ola Electric was selling their chargers separately, which is actually against the rules. Specifically, this was in violation of FAME 2 EV subsidy guidelines from India's Ministry of Heavy Industries. And the part of this situation that I find a little bit strange and funny is that Ola Electric right away said, "Yep, that's true, we did break the rules, and yes, we are going to refund this 130 crore rupees. And that kind of makes me think that this wasn't a mistake, that Ola Electric did know that they were violating these subsidy guidelines, but maybe they just hoped that nobody would notice, or maybe they took this as a temporary, unofficial loan, where they knew that eventually they would need to pay back this 130 crore rupees, but they chose to wait until they were forced to pay it, because ultimately in this business, right, time is money. It's always better to lose 130 crore rupees tomorrow than it is to lose 130 crore rupees today, especially if your customers are already on the hype train and they're voting in your favor with their wallets. There's this narrative that Indian consumers are very price conscious, they're extremely frugal, they're cautious with their money, but this Ola Electric fiasco kind of broke that perception for me personally. We all watched as Indian consumers pre-ordered something without even testing it or reading other customers' reviews, and they just threw money blindly at something, and Ola Electric took advantage of that blindness and shipped a product that was buggy, incomplete, and without a charger. I mean, come on, Ola Electric. Just because Apple got away with this doesn't mean that you can too. But the situation actually gets a little bit uglier because Ola Electric isn't alone here. Ather Energy, TVS Motor, and Hero MotoCorp are also facing allegations for claiming FAME 2 subsidies by artificially keeping their vehicle prices lower, and they did this by allegedly billing integral parts like chargers and proprietary software separately from the vehicle. And this is really disappointing to see because it shows that these companies aren't necessarily running things by the book. They're cutting a couple of corners here and there, which isn't a great way to build trust with consumers or with the government that is supporting you through these subsidies. On top of that, 14 electric two-wheeler manufacturers are under scrutiny for allegedly claiming FAME 2 subsidies in violation of minimum localization norms. What does that mean? It means that these companies are doing the bare minimum, or sometimes less than the bare minimum, which could get them in trouble, of of making scooters in India. Basically, the designs, components, and of course the batteries are made outside of India, and then they're shipped to India and assembled here. And because they're assembled in a factory which is in India, these companies are pretending like they're made in India vehicles, even though they aren't. Now, this particular example that I'm about to share with you didn't happen recently, so I'm just drawing on this tangentially. It's not actually related to this specific situation with the FAME 2 subsidies, but I did think it was relevant. Autocar actually dug into Okinawa and where their scooters are made, and the results here from their investigation were pretty shocking. For example, you can see the comparison between one of Okinawa's scooters and a Chinese scooter, and in a statement, Okinawa said about this comparison that their scooter had been conceptualized and designed in India by our in-house R&D team in association with a world-class external design house. The scooter is made in our new facility in Rajasthan. They also did a side-by-side comparison of Okinawa's Cruiser with another Chinese scooter, and Okinawa's founder Jitendra Sharma said that the two products were not similar at all when he was shown this comparison, which I think is really wild. He said this to Autocar India representatives. And while we're on the topic of similarities, let's check out the difference between Okinawa's logo and a massive Chinese EV manufacturer called Luyuan. All right, next up, another negative piece of news. We need to talk about Byju's and the raid. They were raided by the Enforcement Directorate. Actually, Byju Ravindran's house itself was raided along with 2 offices. And we're actually working on a video right now unpacking how and why this happened, but in a nutshell, to explain it, Byju's allegedly mislabeled some stuff in their accounting, so there were some payments that were supposed to be going to marketing and promotion, and some other payments that were supposed to be going into foreign investment, but this money ended up going into different places that it maybe shouldn't have gone to, according to the Enforcement Directorate. All right, next up, let's talk about some funding news. In terms of the dollar amount, this is actually the largest amount that Indian startups have raised in the last 3 weeks, $145 million to be exact, and we can take a look at that in context here as well. Blue Smart Mobility was the leader here. They raised $42 million to continue expanding their electric ride-hailing service across India, and I'm going to be honest here, the rest of the deals in this list didn't really stand out to me personally this week. I just feel like there's a lot of companies that are doing the same thing as other companies with a slightly different twist or tweak, so I'm not going to go through and actually talk about any of these, but if you want to go through yourself, you can definitely do that. You can find a link to this chart along with all of the other charts that I've mentioned in this funding news segment in the description down below. Last week, I wrapped up the news video by talking about how I personally want to see more Indian startups that are being illogical. They're going so against the grain and they're thinking so outside of the box that pretty much nobody believes in them. VCs definitely don't want to back them. Mentors tell them to do something a little bit more safe and conventional. Even startup founders in the ecosystem are kind of confused and puzzled as to what they're building. Most people won't believe in what they're building, but they do it anyways. And 9 times out of 10, those are the companies that end up crashing and burning the first, but sometimes you end up with a maverick. You end up with a company that gets so big and so successful and nobody saw them coming that they make a massive global impact. And last week I talked about how Apple was one of those companies, but there's a lot of examples in the American ecosystem. Tesla is another good one. They started way early in the EV space and pretty much nobody believed in what they're doing. And now there's a lot of EV companies that are following their example. And I wish that there were more Indian startups that were doing things like that. And I want to hear from you guys. If you have an idea that's really outside of the box, that's really unconventional, that nobody that you talk to believes in, then share that idea with me on Twitter. I want to hear what you guys are building, or at least what you're ideating on, the concepts that you've been playing around with in your head, but you're too scared to start. I just want to see what people are thinking and what the next generation of Indian startup founders is possibly, maybe, if they're brave enough, are going to build. So reach out to me on Twitter, and in next week's news video, I'll share some of the best ideas. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.